Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, Station Manager for Manatee Educational Television. And it's our great pleasure to have with us today Ken Shelin, who, as we'll hear in a few minutes, has contributed a significant amount to this community. So Ken, thank you very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I know you're a very busy gentleman. You're involved in so many things, but I think it's really important to have you to talk about some of the scope of the involvement that you have throughout this area.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure to be here and to talk especially about Equality Florida. I've been involved with Equality Florida since about 2010 when I chaired a local gala, which is a fundraising. Mm-hmm. The organization has about 15 of them around the state to raise the money it needs to operate. And as I continued with those galas over the years up until the present, mm-hmm. I got more and more involved with the organization. I was invited to join the board, mm-hmm. which I did, and several months ago I was elected chair of the state board of the C3 part of Equality Florida, which is the largest. It's a fantastic organization.
Well, doesn't it have over 200,000 members?
Yes, it does.
And growing.
And growing. It's growing rapidly. In fact, in the last year, we doubled our budget and increased our staff substantially and got involved in the marriage equality lawsuits that you've read a lot about recently. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There are 6 of them statewide. 4 of them have had decisions in them, all favorable to mm-hmm. Marriage equality. There are 2 more to go, and hopefully within the next year you'll see marriage equality in the state of Florida.
Well, we want to get into that in detail and talk a little bit about how you're involved, the mission of Equality Florida. But let me give our viewers just a little quick background with you. You've served, as part of the FDA team for over 30 years right. in Washington, D.C. and several of the other, as quality assurance right. and that was a very important career field for you to be in.
Well, I worked in the enforcement part of the agency, which is where the rubber meets the road. We actually interacted with the manufacturers and distributors of the products the agency regulates. It regulates a lot of products
Absolutely.
From soup to nuts, from food to drugs to television sets, by the way, mm-hmm. and medical equipment and cosmetics and all kinds of radiation emitting equipment. I got mainly interested in the pharmaceutical regulation. And so I spent most of my career in that area in the field force and spent my time in Philadelphia, mm-hmm. Detroit for a long time, 21 wow. years. I left wow. 2 of my children there. And in Baltimore, I ended up retiring in 1996. As the director of the Baltimore district of the FDA, which was Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, and the District mm-hmm. of Columbia.
Ken, can you give us a specific incident of where your expertise and knowledge and prowess in helping with regulatory things actually moved it into the marketplace?
Well, the most exciting, I think, my whole career occurred when I was director of the Baltimore district, and the Merck company came to me and said, we are in the first year of testing of a new protease inhibitor for AIDS treatment, and it is showing incredible effectiveness. We've never seen anything like it, and we wanted you to know, number one, and we want to see if there's some way we can facilitate getting this product on the market as quickly as possible. And I said, absolutely, we can do a lot of work that we might otherwise do later on in right. the process. Right now, we can come and visit your plant and look at your quality systems and your testing of drugs and see if they meet our requirements. And so we did that. And after just 1 more year, a total of 2 years, Merck and Company submitted their new drug application to the FDA, and 29 days later it was approved.
Wow. That's pretty phenomenal.
Well, it kind of awakened in me some interest in being more engaged in LGBT issues. Because also when I was in Baltimore, I went to one of the marches, the Pride marches, and the AIDS quilt was being displayed on the mall in Washington, D.C., and it was the most powerful emotional experience, aside from getting married and having children, that I think I ever had.
It is very moving, having seen the AIDS quilt display.
Absolutely.
It's very moving when you see the names and the faces of the thousands of people that have passed away. It's very an emotional experience.
Absolutely. So that kind of crowned my career, and then I retired in 1996 to Sarasota, and I moved to St. Armand's with my partner, and I very quickly got involved in civic issues. I became involved with the St. Armand's Residents Association, eventually became president, and got very involved in politics in the city, and joined the planning board. I was on the city planning board for 5 years during a really fascinating time, because
Growth and development.
Growth and development. It was when the city revamped its zoning code downtown, and you can see what's happened to downtown Sarasota as a consequence. So that awakened this interest not only in LGBT issues, but
civic involvement.
But civic involvement. And so I eventually ran for and was elected to the city commission.
And let's do it briefly, if you want to talk about, not being in politics for a period of, for most of your career, finding that kind of civic engagement, to want to run, because running for politics is a tough business. You have to go out there and grab supporters and get funding and all of those type of things.
Right.
What was that catalyst that said, I want to run for office?
I had an advantage because I had worked for the federal government, and I understood how government works. I had been involved not just as a manager in a field enforcement organization, but I had written policy documents. I had written regulations. And so I thought I understood how government worked. What I didn't and had never experienced was running for elected office. And of course, that was a learning experience. But I did it, and I thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity to serve on the city commission.
Well, not only did you serve on the city commission, for your term, but you became involved in so many other organizations. And I'd like to briefly just talk about a little bit, and we'll talk, some of the, you mentioned the St. Armand's Residents Association and the Planning Board, but you were also on the Board of Trustees for the Players Theater, which is a wonderful theater, and you were pretty much of a catalyst in their growth and development as well.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that. What many people don't know is that I have a degree in theater, but I also have a major in biology, which is what qualified me for the Food and Drug Administration. I have this right brain, left brain thing going on.
What a great combination.
Yeah. Well, it paid off because I was able to get a job, even with a theater degree. So that attracted me to the Players. Actually, when I lived in Detroit, I had been a member of another theater group called the Players, and so it just seemed like a natural fit for me. But I got involved in a lot of other organizations. Currently, I'm involved, for example, with Meals on Wheels in Sarasota. I'm on the advisory board of the West Coast Black Theater Troupe.
Great organization.
And I'm chairing the C3 board, which is the largest part of Equality Florida statewide. And that is very satisfying because, as I said, initially, when I dealt with the Crixivan approval for Merck and Company, I got interested in LGBT issues. So when I was on the city commission, I actually got the commissioners to agree to provide health care benefits for the domestic partners of city employees. A lot of people don't know that that's going on, and we had it in Sarasota before Tampa had it.
Which is a remarkable achievement, and a lot of that, most of it is due to your leadership in making that happen. Your engagement as a public servant, is pretty extensive. But as you became more involved with Equality Florida, you found that you wanted to reach out and make sure that some of these efforts on behalf of the gay and lesbian community we're being effective. So before we go into that, I wanted you to kind of give us an overview of the mission of Equality Florida.
Sure.
And what their goals are and how they best serve not only this area, but the entire state.
Well, simply said, it's to assure equality of LGBT people with the rest of the community. It's about eliminating discrimination, increasing diversity and tolerance in our communities across the state of Florida. The organization is only 16 years old. It has, as you've already said, about 200,000 members.
Which is significant.
Which is unbelievable. It's growing very fast, and it's being effective. It's working. It's been working on getting rid of bullying in schools.
Which is a serious issue.
Absolutely.
It's a serious issue.
Absolutely. The gay adoption ban that existed in Florida is gone, partly because of the work of Equality Florida. We've been working on domestic partnership registry ordinances around the state. You know, over half the state's population is now covered by domestic partnership registry ordinances.
And I must just pause for one moment, that you were an integral part of bringing that domestic registry to the city of Sarasota. That was an important step for that community to recognize the significance of a domestic registry. And subsequent to having that in the city of Sarasota, you've made further efforts, to reach out to surrounding communities to ensure that
Right.
domestic registry, the knowledge of what that can do for other communities is there. So again, hats off to you for making that initial effort. And I'm sure it wasn't an easy task at the time.
Well, my life has been a very serendipitous kind of series of events, and it was curious how somebody came to me one day and said, we would like to approach the City Commission in Sarasota for a domestic partnership registry. How do we do that? Because they knew I'd been on the commission. Actually, with somebody in my building. And I said, oh, that's easy. I'll do it. I'll help you. And so I went to the City Commission, and it went very smoothly. It took a few months, but it went very well, and we ultimately got a unanimous vote. And then I got to thinking, after that had been accomplished, and after a large number of people started registering in the city, now
Right.
there are about 250 couples who've registered in Sarasota, I thought, well, why don't we go to Venice? Why don't we see if Venice will do it? And we did, and they unanimously voted. In fact, one of the really funny things was, before I had even finished my presentation, one of the city councilmen in Venice made a motion to move forward with it, and I thought, wow, this is the way to go.
You're on a roll.
Yeah.
You're on a roll. Fine, I don't have to do any more presentations.
Then I went to the city of Northport. They adopted it unanimously. The county of Sarasota adopted it unanimously. And then some people in Charlotte County had heard what I was doing and asked me to come to Punta Gorda, which I did. And earlier this year, they unanimously adopted a domestic partnership registry ordinance. Well, that's led to some other activity, and now I'm working with people in Manatee County, as well as Lee County and Collier County on creating both domestic partnership registry ordinances and human rights ordinances. They're both designed to assure equality. That's what it's all about.
And that's a very great point there, Ken, if I may say so, is that your efforts on behalf of the LGBT community is about equality. It's about human rights. And it's those basic human rights that are guaranteed to everyone. And why is that critical for you? Why is that so important for you to continue your efforts?
I think there are two reasons. I very clearly remember my 9th grade civics teacher, and I remembered her talks about the U.S. Constitution.
Hold that up so everybody can see it. You're holding a copy of the U.S. Constitution there.
And the fact that it's all about equality in here. The basic premise of this, and the basic premise of our revolution, is to assure everybody has equal rights, that there's fairness for all. The other event was my grandmother's teaching. My grandmother taught me the golden rule, and I remember that very clearly. I don't know why I remember those things, but they spoke to me powerfully, and I've remembered them all my life. And in school situations and in work situations, both for the government and privately, I've been very focused on fairness and equality. And so it's natural to me to be attracted to the effort to assure that. Mm-hmm. The domestic partnership registries honor the fact that some people can't or don't want to get married.
Right.
Either because they're same-sex couples or they're opposite-sex couples who, for financial reasons or tax reasons or even preference, won't get married, can't get married, but they are blocked from doing some very simple, essential things to make life work, which is being able to visit their partner in a hospital or having input into the partner's healthcare decisions or end-of-life decisions. Or even being able to pick up a minor child who's living within the partnership from school. Mm-hmm. So that those domestic partnership registries allow that. And they eliminate this problem that a lot of people have had, including me, of getting privately written powers of attorney or healthcare surrogate documents.
Which can be very overwhelming, for a lot of people.
They can be expensive, they can be complicated, and they may not work. And that's been my experience. I've had them refused, and I thought, well, how could I have been expected to spend thousands of dollars and make a sincere effort to do the right thing and be denied these privileges of input into my partner's health care? So that was a natural for me. The human rights ordinances are designed to prevent discrimination in housing, public accommodations, and employment.
Right.
And we know from experience in this country that it's a struggle and it takes a long time. The African American experience is instructive for us in the LGBT community because it tells us that it's not easy. It tells us, it actually lays out some strategies.
There's obstacles to overcome. There's prejudices to be, for people to be educated about. But it's not just the African American experience. I think, as you were mentioning earlier, throughout American history, there's always been, some segment of the population that has always been subjected to bias, and whether it's the Irish or the Italians or whatever,
or women.
Women, for example, it's another perfect
Women
example.
are still struggling against the glass ceiling in employment. But we've had examples here recently in the last year that I'm aware of. But we also had a young lesbian couple burned out of their home in Nokomis about a year ago by a neighbor who cut the water line on their trailer and set fire to it and forced them out without any way of helping themselves because the water line had been cut. That galvanizes you when you hear that kind of thing, but it's happening today.
Well, I think another thing that you mentioned, and again, I see the passion and the effort that you've put in, to all of the things that you've done. But one of the things that you mentioned, which is, I think is worthy of note, is, to prevent bullying. There's a lot of young people that are going through things that are bullied, harassed, at school or other places because of their point of view, which is really, really unfortunate. And I think that organizations like Equality Florida are doing tremendous amount of work to educate people that, one, you shouldn't tolerate bullying, and two, just the mindset of trying to make that stop. And it's an uphill battle. But
Absolutely.
It's really an important thing because young people are, they're very susceptible to that kind of hate and fear.
Absolutely, and it happens in all kinds of ways. It could be the color of your hair, it could be your height, it could be whether you're overweight or whether you're skinny. There are all kinds of reasons as people are going through puberty why, or even before puberty, why they are bullied. And we've got to stop that. It happens obviously in adulthood too.
Sure.
We've got to control that. It becomes a hate crime when you're an adult. But we are making progress. The Sarasota County school system has a policy that prohibits that sort of thing, and there is now state law that prohibits it as well. So we've got to continue our efforts because that's not something that's going to go away easily.
I agree, and it's not something, but I think, thanks to the efforts of Equality Florida and people like you, there's a greater sense of awareness. There's a greater sense that there's other organizations and people out there that, people don't have to feel alone. People feel that there's a sense of community. And I think that's a, part of your efforts throughout your career, throughout all your civic engagement that you do, is that we're all part of a community.
Right.
And we're all equal parts of that community.
Right. Well, I think there are always galvanizing events in the community and in individual lives. In the LGBT community, it was probably the Stonewall riots in 1967, which was 45 years ago in June. And it galvanized the community because that they said, we aren't going to take it anymore. They had been bullied, they had been treated badly, were the victims of bias. And out of that grew an effort to let people know who we really were. Coming out is a process that all gay people have to go through. And that event, that Stonewall riot, said, we have got to come out. The public has got to see who we really are. We aren't a bunch of mincing pansies. We are people like your brother, your sister, your
teachers.
They're members of the community, and when people get to know who you really are, then a lot of these biases melt away. There's no basis for them anymore.
I think that's very eloquent, and you're exactly right. I think that once you see behind that perception of what you see that individual for what he is, that individual, and I think it's an important key element of what you talked about. But the efforts to educate, inform, enlighten people. It's a process. It's not something where you click on a switch and everything changes. That's not how it happens. It's a long, it's a strenuous process, I would imagine, for you, and you've dedicated a good portion of your life and time and effort to doing that. But what's next? I mean, you briefly mentioned the fact of Key West and the injunction and everything. But there are steps, there are processes that you would like to see. And how do you see this? What are the next things that you'd like to see kind of develop?
That's why an organization like Equality Florida is so important, because it has several roles in the society in an effort to reach its mission of eliminating bias and assuring equality. It needs to educate the public. It needs to tell the public not only who we are, but to highlight those instances where we're being treated unfairly. And if we can't get the public to accept it, although we have done an incredible job, 57% of Florida's population now opposes the ban in the state constitution on same-sex marriage. We've been very successful. We're not as far as we need to be, because to overturn the ban, we need 60%. So education is a very, very important piece of what we do. And we do that with literature. We do that with public appearances like this. We do it with forums that we put on in the community. We do it by engaging people in a conversation and talking about why it's important for us to be treated the same way as everybody else. It's not an issue of special rights. It's not an issue of being different. It's an issue of being the same.
Yeah, and basic. There's no sense of entitlement. There's no sense of anything. It's a basic say. If this is the way we want to be on the same footing, and I think that's an important issue, an important point.
Yeah.
And I would suggest to you, Ken, that with people as eloquent and as passionate and as devoted, to this issue, that progress can continue to be made.
Oh, it will be made. And right now, as I said earlier, I'm lobbying in Manatee County, lobbying the county commissioners. We'll be lobbying the Bradenton City Council people and the mayor. but we're also working in Lee County and in Cape Coral, and the Lee County Commission, Bonita Springs, Naples, Collier County. We're working in all those areas very clearly focused on getting domestic partnership registries in place and eliminating discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations by creating a human rights ordinance. But there's all kinds of other things.
Exactly. Tell us
that
about
have
some of
to be
those other
done.
things. Well, the one thing that you mentioned about eliminating, for education, housing, and things, that's very important. One would think in this day and age, in an enlightened period, in 2014, that these would be kind of givens, but they're really not. You still see that prejudice and bias being subjected to the LGBT.
And a lack of fairness. Well, one very simple example is the fact that domestic partners, even though they have documented their relationship, are taxed as individuals by the federal government and state government if there are income taxes there as well. They are taxed unfairly. Married couples get a break because they can file joint returns and they can pay at the married rate rather than
the single,
than the single rate. So we've got to eliminate that problem. Obviously, employment is another area. There are still fundamental biases amongst private companies. Religious institutions are claiming exemptions, which is why can we constitutionally allow discrimination in the name of religion? Why would any religion want to support discrimination?
Right.
That's
an important issue. Now, I'm sure, as somebody who's eloquent, informed, and knowledgeable as you, and you have the opportunity to go out throughout this community and many others, and you sit there and you feel the concerns of people out there. What is that one critical thing that you feel that people need to know about, the LGBT community? Because I think it's important, for people to realize, that this is 2014. We're not living in the 1950s anymore. So I mean,
the one thing that they need to know is that we're not different than they are. Unfortunately, in the past, and I think it's been true of the African American experience, women have experienced it, the Irish, the Italians, these populations have been encapsulated. They have been walled off. They've been at times forced. Jews, for example, lived in ghettos. They've been encapsulated within the larger society. We've got to eliminate those walls, those boundaries, that encapsulation, and integrate ourselves within society at large so that everybody can see, hey, you're no different than I am. You have skills I need. You have abilities I need. You have talents I need. And I'm going to take advantage of it. And it doesn't matter to me that you're different than I am.
And whether it's in the workforce or in education or in housing, I think those are the key elements that people bring. An individual is that individual. They rise and fall on the merits of the content of their character. And I think that's an important thing. Now, Ken, we're kind of winding down a little bit, and I want to spend a few minutes talking about, successful government employee for many years, consultant for many years, public servant for many years, reaching out to the community, and now your involvement with Equality Florida is just important. What's next for you? I mean, where do you see yourself in these efforts? And I'm sure you have many other things that you're getting involved in.
I don't know. I think one of the characteristics I have personally, and I think it's the kind of characteristic everybody ought to try to exhibit, is a willingness to recognize change and opportunities for being a part of that effort. Opportunity comes to you.
It's true.
The trick is recognizing that it's there. and if you can recognize that it's there, and it appeals to you to become involved, then do it. And I think that's what I've done.
Yeah, well, and you've done that, considerably. I mean, we've only touched briefly on some of the many, many civic things that you've been involved in. And I would suggest to you that your efforts on all of these many things is that you're not a politician, you are a public servant, and you've contributed significantly not only to the well-being of the community, but also to those individuals that need a leader, need somebody to say, I need you to carry our flag for us for a little bit.
Yeah.
And you've done that. You've done that, repeatedly, and you're to be congratulated for that.
Well, the biggest frustration for me has been, and I experienced it in elected office, is to be true to what I believe. And in fact, that was an asset, but it was also a negative for me because I think I could have continued in elected office if I had been more willing to subordinate my personal beliefs to the political process and pandering.
And that's why I would say that you're not a politician, you really are that public servant. And and that's most unfortunate because the leadership and the knowledge and the background, the passion that you've brought to all of these things that you've been involved with did serve the community very well, but could continue. But politics is a tough business.
Well, it sure is, and I've seen people do it in a way that disturbs me. I've had people even admit to me that they were doing things that they didn't necessarily agree with, but they were doing it to get elected. And I cannot understand that. I cannot do it. So I will continue to do the things that move me, that I believe in, and I hope at some time I can quit.
Well, I think the level and the intensity of the effort that you've brought, not to everything throughout your career, is really shining through this time with Equality Florida. Now, we only have a couple of minutes left. If people want to find out something about the mission and the goals and what Equality Florida does, how can they do that?
Well, it's very easy. There's a website, a very comprehensive website for Equality Florida, and it's www.eqfl.org.
We're going to put that up on the screen.
That's all it is. You'll find a lot there. We have a second website called www.gettingengaged.org, which talks more specifically about the marriage equality issue. And it's actually the way Equality Florida was able to get the plaintiffs in the lawsuit that we were involved in Miami. There's a very large LGBT component to our population here, and it's unbelievable that they've tolerated discrimination for so long. But I think we've gotten real smart, and fortunately, there is funding available in the LGBT community, and they've put their money to work in a smart way to educate the public about the lack of fairness that we're experiencing, and the public is responding. In the state of Florida, that's the best part.
And I think, again, with the leadership of you and others throughout the state, there is that effort, those strides being made. And I think a lot of it in this community, with your efforts with the domestic registry and among many, many other things, you've made great strides. You've made great strides for the LGBT community, and for that you're to be congratulated.
Well, thank you. You're very kind.
And I think, as I said before, it's one thing to be a politician, but you really have been a public servant. And I think your efforts, not only for Equality Florida, but throughout anything that you've undertaken for the city of Sarasota, the Players Theater, and all the many organizations that you've participated in, have really made a significant thing to the quality of life for individuals and for throughout this community. And Ken, I just want to thank you very much for joining us, and we would welcome you back at any time, and perhaps we can open this up to a forum later time to talk about some of the key issues that are facing.
I'd be happy to do that,
and we'll let you host that.
And we can focus on Manatee County too.
And we'll let you host that program too.
Okay.
And thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for joining us on this very special edition of Up Close on METV.